Have you ever found yourself in debt and knew you couldn't pay? Perhaps the creditor had threatened to collect on the debt no matter what. They're starting the repo process. They're moving forward with the foreclosure. This can no doubt cause one to feel desperate simply because of debt. In today's message, I'll be sharing a story about a woman who lost her husband due to death. But not only that, she's left with two sons to raise and also left with debt she can't pay. She seeks help from the man of God only to realize that the help she needed was already in her house. If we're meeting for the first time, I'm Tabor, pastor of Divine Church located in Metro Atlanta, where we believe it's simply about His will, His way, His word. Let us now witness this powerful message. 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, verses 1 through 7. The wife of the man from the company of prophets cried out to Elijah, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my two boys as his slaves." Elijah replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." Elijah said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There's not a jar left." And then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your son can live on what is left." Here in today's text, we are introduced to a woman whose husband is now deceased. She's now classified as a widower with two sons. At the time of our text, her husband's death has left her in debt. Now, here in verse 1, she's found in despair. This situation here in the text, no doubt, can speak to many of us as we continue to deal with the global pandemic, which has taken the lives of over 500,000 people globally at the time of this filming. If you're watching and your family has fallen victim to COVID-19, I want to encourage you, just keep watching so you can see how even in desperation, God can still provide deliverance. You see, this woman started out in verse 3 with little, but some 4 verses later, she has leftovers. I want to speak to you for the next few moments from this thought: from little to leftovers. The story is about an unidentified woman who has lost her husband, and no doubt he was her helper. He was the provider. Now she's alone with her two sons and has no money. The creditor has come to collect, but she can't even pay. She starts out in verse 1 with death, debt, and despair. As I looked at this text, however, the one thing that seems to be working in her favor is her husband's devotion to God when he was alive. It is that now that has allowed her to approach the prophet Elijah and ask for assistance. Take note that as she approaches the prophet, she's in poverty. Her debt is high and her income is low. When asked what she has in her house, she replies, "I have nothing except a little oil." May I pause and encourage someone watching by saying, sometimes our nothing is a setup for God's something. She mentions she has a little oil. The man of God instructs her to borrow jars from all her neighbors and not just a few. Please understand that in the midst of poverty, you must drop your pride in order to unleash your God-given potential. Through her obedience, she's now carrying out the next phase of her instructions, which was to go inside her house with her sons and close the door. May I suggest to you watching that although she's in poverty, she had to seek aid publicly that allowed her now the much needed privacy. Her neighbors probably had no idea why she needed so many jars, but look at her exercising her faith by pouring the oil into each jar, just as Elijah instructed her to do. We must grow to a point to understand that our private practices in the presence of God must become our new priorities. When we're willing to exercise a little faith, offer up a little praise, and be persistent with it, God can also move us from little to leftovers. The oil continued as long as she had jars and continued to pour. In closing, this widow started out in poverty, moved into an earned privacy activated that required persistency. Through her continual pouring, as a result of all of this, God granted her prosperity. Her final instructions from the prophet was sell the oil, pay her debts, and live off the rest. It is my prayer that each of you watching will activate your faith and be obedient to whatever it is that God has instructed you to do, that you too can move from little to leftovers.